Thank you, General Halad. At this point, let's talk about education. And I'd like to call on Secretary Briones to report on DepEd and what's happening in the department.
Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening, fellow members of the Cabinet, as well as the Filipino people. We want to give a summary of our 5-year gains in the fight for accessible and quality education. During the past 5 years, Mr. President, we have continually addressed the challenge of quality in basic education. We are now concentrating on quality since we were successful in increasing enrollment levels. So it's not quantity alone, but quality as well. Under our program of Sulong Edukalidad, we reviewed the curriculum where before we required more than 15,000 learning competencies, and which were reduced to 5,000 in the light of the pandemic, Mr. President. We all know that where there are good students, well-performing learners, there should be good teachers as well. There will be good teachers, and we will have good learners. And so we are transforming the National Educators Academy of the Philippines. We are also continuously consulting with the broad range of stakeholders, which we call the Education Forum, which gives us advice on many things relative to education. The gains, next please. The gains in education, Mr. President, were made possible because of the very high level of support and commitment that your administration has given to education right from the beginning. When you assumed in 2016, Mr. President, you increased our budget by 31% from 2015, which is very, very significant. And at present, our budget stands at 595 billion pesos, which constitutes a significant portion of our national budget as provided for by the Constitution. Next, please. What is important, Mr. President, is how we utilize the budget and the funds which are made available to us. In the year 2015, just before you assumed office, Mr. President, we had in DepEd 88% budget utilization. At present, for the year 2020, your budget utilization rate is 96%. This means that we have, as much as possible, utilized the funds that you have given to us through the national budget from 88 to 96%. Next, please. Mr. President, insofar as the enrollment is concerned, as I said, we first concentrated on quantity. We recorded an 8.45% increase in enrollment from 24.92 million learners to 27 million learners in 2019. And despite the pandemic, Mr. President, we managed an enrollment of 26.23 million students for this year, which is 97% of pre-pandemic. And considering all the different varieties of viruses which has plagued our system, including education, it's quite significant that our enrollment levels are still high. Next, please. We also have invested the funds that you have given to us through our budget in improving the learning environment. We have built, with funds which you provided, 150,149 new classrooms compared to the period of 2010 to 2016 of 118,000. We have built technical and vocational laboratories of 12,786 compared to 147 which were built during the same period of 2010 and 2016. We have repaired and rehabilitated classrooms, 103,548, vis-a-vis the previous period of 35,804. And since we believe and we protect our heritage schools, we have rebuilt with the funds that you have given us 588 Gabaldon heritage schools. These are the very old schools, perhaps during your mother's time, from 53 the previous administration to 588 Gabaldon schools restored. And we have also benefited 2.1 million average of beneficiaries. Only recently, with the donation of the Department of Finance, of gadgets and tablets, which were turned over to us by the Bureau of Customs, we distributed these to the what we call the last mile schools, schools which have been nearly forgotten and were left behind. Next, please. We are also reaching more out of school young people. You have always opened your heart to learners who don't have the opportunity to study and to pursue education. And so our enrollment, for example, Mr. President, for the equivalent of 5 years compared to the previous 5 years is 57% higher than past administrations, in spite of all the challenges of pandemics and viruses and various controversies. And so we produced graduates from one region, for example, where we piloted senior high school for the alternative learning systems. This is for students who don't have the opportunity to go to regular school because they are either working or they don't have the capacity to support themselves. Next, please. On the matter of nourishment and nutrition, we all know the direct relationship between good nutrition and good learning, effective learning for our children. So we have an annual average of 2,191,442 malnourished and undernourished learner beneficiaries benefiting from school-based feeding programs. Right now, we have projects with agencies, for example, like the Department of Agriculture, to provide milk and bread for learners who are malnourished and undernourished. Our ideal and our ambition, our dream, Mr. President, that we don't distinguish between and among malnourished and undernourished. All children should be fed when they go to school, as they are fed also in other countries. Next, please. We have distributed 55,151 ICT. This is internet packages, which were delivered for the past 5 years. And as I have said, we immediately distributed donations from the Department of Finance and other partners for advancing our journey towards the digital age. Personally, Mr. President, I would like to lessen our dependence on materials which are made out of paper, because we trigger floods, we require the killing of forests, etc., etc. And usually these materials are more expensive compared to ICT. And we are grateful. Department of Finance has donated twice already customs. And we are hoping that they will catch more smugglers for the benefit of our learners. And have also been negotiating with our multilateral partners like Asian Development Bank for the provision, Mr. President, of radios and other means of teaching and learning for our students, because there are places where you don't have connectivity, and we use radios, and they're very interesting for our children. We also have improved the ratio. We are always told time and again, Mr. President, that you have classes with 70 or 80 kids and one teacher. This is not true anymore. In 2016, when you started, we brought down the number of students per classroom to 32 per class. And in 2020, we brought down the number to 28 learners per class, instead of the usual dramatics about 60 to 70 or 80 kids per classroom. Most important, Mr. President, next please, in our fight for access and quality, next please, for our teachers, we consider them our heroes. And I have shown this chart before. Please, next chart, please. This one. It's very interesting, Mr. President. When you came in 2016, a teacher one who is at the lowest level of teaching earned 19,077. At this time, basic salary to Mr. President, he or she is earning 23,877 under your administration, Mr. President. By the time you end your administration in 2022, the lowest salary rate of a teacher, lowest grade, is 25,439, and not the pittance, which has also been described by various sources. So by the end of your term, first we started the highest level for a teacher, Mr. President. Perhaps your mother was a master teacher, but she was even higher than this. When you came in, the salary of the highest teacher grade was 43,000. Now, the salary of the highest teacher grade is 60,901. Very, very much higher than my salary when I was a full professor at the University of the Philippines and an emeritus professor, 60,000. And by 2022, when you finish your term, your highest teacher, this is master teacher 4, will be at 62,449 basic salary, Mr. President. Now, in addition to the basic salaries, which you have generously provided, because all of us love our teachers, you have other allowances which our teachers earn, like the personal economic relief allowance. This is 2,000 pesos, Mr. President. The clothing allowance of 6,000 pesos. Before, Mr. President, we gave uniforms ready-made or cloth to be made into uniforms. Now we give them money. They have a choice. We give them 6,000. It's their choice. They can have new uniforms made, or they can make do with their old uniforms, but they are not held accountable for that money. Whatever they do with their clothing allowance, that is their choice, and that is 6,000 pesos. Of course, they have the mid-year bonus, which is allotted to all government employees. This is 1 month basic pay. Then you have this special hardship allowance for those who are in more difficult circumstances. This is 25% of the annual basic salary, 1/4. Then you have the honoraria for teaching overload. We have to emphasize this because perhaps the public needs more information on the benefits that you, under your administration, has given to teachers, which is a maximum of 25% of basic salary. I wish cabinet members will also get 25% of their basic salary when they stay up to 12 midnight attending IATF meetings. And then, most wonderful of all, and Senator Bong has been instrumental here, is the World Teachers Day incentive, which is 1,000 pesos per teacher. Every year, we celebrate Global Teachers Day. The entire world pays tribute to the teacher. But ours is different because we give money, we give cash awards to our teachers, all of them. And while 1,000 seems small, you signed and you approved 910 million for this particular benefit alone for the teacher, a very huge chunk of our budget. And that is how you have always loved teachers. And then we have the 1 month basic pay of the employee as well, plus the usual representation allowance and transportation allowance. And then you have the step, this is called the step increment due to length of service. The longer you stay in government or in the Department of Education, for every 3 years of continuous service, you are promoted 1 step. And this is part of the 3-page list of benefits. Then you have the productivity enhancement incentive, which is which we call the performance bonus, and we have debates about this, of course. This is 5,000 per year, Mr. President. And then the cash gift of 5,000 again, Mr. President. And then for those who specialize in teaching science and mathematics, they have free salary step increments if they specialize in mathematics and science, because we are moving into the digital age. Furthermore, Mr. President, and it's a very long list, I'm sorry to bore you, it's a long list of money for our teachers. Loyalty cash incentive, 1,000 pesos for every year of service. Cash allowance subject to special provisions of the GAA, 5,000 pesos per year. Transportation and teaching aid allowance for the alternative learning teachers, those who teach for our ALS program, which you have generously supported, 3,000 and 5,000 pesos, Mr. President. So we have 3 pages of benefits which our teachers right now are enjoying. And then we also have been proposing additional teaching positions for the teachers. Before, Mr. President, the highest level of teaching is for a teacher is teacher 3, and then the next would already be master teacher 1, 2, 3, 4. We are proposing not only from teacher 3, we are proposing teacher 4, 5, 6, 7. So there will be more spaces for the teachers to move up from, with the corresponding proposed also increase in compensation. And for master teacher, we're also proposing an additional rank, kasi ngayon it's only up to master teacher 4. Right now, a master teacher gets 60,901 pesos. As I said, nearly double my salary as a full professor in UP. We are proposing the addition of another rank of master teacher 5 at 68,450 basic salary for the teacher. And this is how your administration has all these years, these 5 years, given attention and recognized the services of our teachers. Lastly, Mr. President, we are initiating a number of new projects. I always say, Mr. President, that I am the oldest in the Department of Education, but I am the youngest in terms of ideas and programs in the department. And we have established what I describe as the Education Futures Program, wherein we try to discern, hindi naman parang Madam Auring, what society will be, what it will need, so that education can respond. Like, for example, the possibilities now of robot teachers, which are being studied in other countries, brain implants, machines which are so much better than humans, and how can humans remain human in the light of all these fascinating developments. So we are not looking at next year's election, Mr. President, but perhaps 30 years from now, 40 years from now, what will society be like? How will we prepare our learners? How will we prepare them mentally, aside from memorizing multiplication tables, Mr. President, as well as correcting their grammar? So this is one program which we are very interested in. And of course, another new addition, and Senator Bong is here with me, of course, is the establishment of the National Academy of Sports, which we are hoping to open also within this year, also together with the formal opening of classes. So bago itong dalawa, National Academy of Sports and the Education Futures program. So, Mr. President, these are just a few of the things that we have achieved with your support, with your inspiration, and of course, with your financial generosity. And we look forward to attaining these goals by the time your term ends. Thank you, Mr. President.
Salamat, ma'am.
An audit report with memoranda on whatever they believe are their findings. Then they sit down with the client agencies. All of you have gone through that. You sit down and clarify, and we answer in writing to the commission and audit on what their findings are. Usually these are documentary requirements. And then on that basis, they will say that, well, we are convinced, or maybe we are not convinced, and that is when they will issue the notice of disallowance, the audit disallowance, where specific persons are mentioned. But before that, the agency has the opportunity to answer, and also the audit body is usually required, when it submits its final notice of disallowance, the answer of the agency, ina-attach nila yon. Kung halimbawa you are accused of this or that, and then the agency answers, i-attach yan, and they can say whether it is okay or not. So there is a protocol involved before the commission and audit makes its final judgment. Secondly, also on your observation about private agencies being subject to public audit. In my long life, I was involved in the preparation of the General Auditing Code as Secretary to the Commission on Audit. And there is a provision there which says that where public interest, where public funds are involved, then the Commission on Audit has the right to audit a private entity, to trace whether it is beneficial to the people or not. And I believe that provision is still there. I hope it is still there. And that is very important because public interest is at stake here. Just those 2 points, Mr. President.
Yes, ma'am.